All right, so anyone looking to understand the refrigerant market in China, especially heading into 2025 and beyond, you've come to the right place. We're diving deep into a whole stack of research today, breaking down this world of refrigerants. We're talking regulations, market shifts, and yeah, even how this all ties into stock prices.
It's interesting because refrigerants are essential. I mean, think about it. Air conditioning, refrigerators, we rely on them, but they also have a big impact on the environment, and that's a key piece of this puzzle.
Absolutely. We're talking ozone depletion, global warming, the whole shebang.
Exactly. And to really get a grip on this market, you need to understand how refrigerants are categorized. Think of it in terms of four generations, each with a different effect on the ozone layer and their contribution to global warming.
Okay, so let's break down those generations a bit. What are the key differences?
Well, the first generation, those are the CFCs. You'd find those in like really old refrigerators. They did the job, but were really bad for the ozone layer, so they've been banned globally.
Makes sense. So what came after that?
Next up were the HCFCs, the second generation. Better for the ozone layer, but still had an impact. And China's phasing these out on a pretty tight schedule, actually.
Got it. So that brings us up to the third generation. Those are the ones in use mostly today, right?
Yes, HFCs are the dominant refrigerants now. However, they're facing restrictions because of their contribution to global warming.
So it seems like there's a push toward that fourth generation then. What makes them so different?
The fourth generation, those are the HFOs and HDs. Much more environmentally friendly, lower impact on both the ozone layer and the climate. But they do come with some technical and cost challenges that are preventing them from wider adoption.
So it's like this race, trying to find cooling solutions that work without harming the environment.
Exactly. And that's where China's policies come into play. They've really been at the forefront on climate change, adopting the Kigali Amendment, which focuses on phasing down those HFCs.
That's a pretty big deal. What does that mean practically for the refrigerant market in China?
Well, for starters, China's frozen production and consumption of HFCs at 2024 levels. Then, by 2029, they have to start reducing HFC production, with a goal of an 80% cut by 2045.
Wow, that's a huge shift. So where do things stand in the market right now, in the present?
The market's actually recovering from a downturn. There was some oversupply, and then the pandemic had an effect. But now, prices for some of the key HFCs are rebounding significantly.
So are companies trying to grab market share before these HFC quotas really kick in?
Absolutely. Competition is heating up as companies try to position themselves for what's to come. You've got this countdown clock ticking, and everyone's trying to figure out their next move.
Okay, I'm hooked. So what can we expect in 2025 and beyond? What's the outlook, and how will this affect stocks?
Well, one major trend to watch is industry consolidation. The big players, companies like Jua, Sanmei, and Dongyu, are likely to become even more dominant. We could see them controlling over 80% of the market.
So a few major players will be calling the shots, huh?
It's looking that way. And with production capped, but demand increasing, you can bet HFC prices are expected to climb. We could be looking at a decade or more of price increases, and that's going to have a big impact on the market.
So if I'm an investor, what should I be paying attention to?
If you're looking at stocks, keep an eye on the companies that are aggressively going after market share. Take Jua, for example. They've maintained high capacity utilization even during the recent downturn. That tells you they're playing the long game.
Makes sense. So thinking long-term is key here. What else should investors be looking at?
Look for the companies focusing on innovation, especially those developing those fourth generation refrigerants we talked about. Those are the refrigerants of the future, and companies ahead of the curve there will be in a strong position.
So adaptability is essential in this market. Any other advice?
Yeah, also keep an eye out for companies expanding into new markets, things like new energy and materials, diversifying, creating new revenue streams. It's all about being able to evolve with the market.
It sounds like we've got a market in transition with a lot of moving parts.
I
What are some of the things that could shake things up even more? Some potential surprises?
Well, there are a couple of wild cards. First, China might accelerate the HCFC phase out to meet its climate goals. If that happens, it'll create even higher demand for HFCs in the short term.
So the transition could be even faster than we anticipate. What about that other wild card?
Remember how the pandemic affected demand back in 2020? Well, the HFC quotas were set based on those lower demand numbers. So if demand rebounds strongly, those quotas might end up being too low, squeezing supply even further.
Right, so we could have a supply crunch on top of everything else. This market could get really tight really quickly.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to understand these dynamics. It's crucial for anyone who wants to stay ahead of the curve.
We're on the verge of some major changes in the refrigerant market in China.
Absolutely. It'll be fascinating to watch these trends play out over the next few years.
Lots to think about. But before we jump to any conclusions, let's dig a little deeper into the nuances of the Chinese market. There are some very specific factors that could really shape how this all unfolds.
Yeah, some fascinating insights to unpack when we take a closer look.
Let's do it.
So, zooming in on China specifically, the sheer scale of their refrigerant industry is pretty mind-blowing.
Oh, it's massive, no doubt. They're already the world's top producer and consumer, right?
Exactly. And that dominance is only going to grow as global demand for cooling keeps rising. You've got rising incomes, more urbanization, especially in those developing countries. It all fuels the need for more cooling.
It sounds like China's in a prime position to take advantage of that.
They are, but it's not just about churning out huge volumes of refrigerants. China's actually focusing on quality, too, moving up the value chain.
What do you mean by that?
Well, they're not content with just making basic refrigerants anymore. China's pouring money into research and development, particularly for those next-gen eco-friendly refrigerants we were talking about.
So they're thinking long-term, getting ahead of the curve, anticipating what the market will demand.
Precisely. It's a smart move considering how quickly the global regulatory landscape is changing. The companies that can adapt and innovate, those are the ones that will ultimately succeed.
It's like a high-stakes game of chess, with all these companies constantly making strategic moves.
That's a great analogy. And China's playing the game well. They're leveraging their manufacturing power, their access to raw materials, their growing technological expertise. It's a powerful combination.
But they're not without their challenges.
Right.
I mean, no market is perfect.
Of course not. One of the biggest hurdles facing the Chinese refrigerant market is this issue of illegal production and trade.
Right. The black market for refrigerants, that's a tricky one.
Yeah, it's a problem that affects the whole industry worldwide, but it's especially prevalent in China. A lot of these illegal refrigerants don't meet safety or environmental standards, and they undercut the legitimate businesses, creating chaos in the market.
So it's a double whammy. Bad for the environment and bad for the economy.
Exactly, a lose-lose situation. And it's a complex issue to solve. You need strong enforcement of regulations, collaboration between the government and industry stakeholders, and you need to raise public awareness. It's multifaceted.
Lots of moving parts. But is China taking this seriously? Are they making any efforts to address it?
Oh, they are. They've been cracking down on illegal production and trade, and they're investing in technology to track and trace refrigerants throughout their entire life cycle. Almost like giving each batch a digital fingerprint.
So more transparency in the supply chain.
Exactly. And it's crucial because the stakes are high. The future of the refrigerant market, its impact on the global climate, it all hinges on whether China can effectively manage these complexities.
It's a big responsibility, but it sounds like they're stepping up.
They are. They get how important their role is in this global transition, and they're committed to being a leader in making the refrigerant industry more sustainable.
That's encouraging. Because ultimately, what happens in China's refrigerant market affects everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a global issue that needs global solutions.
Let's circle back to those fourth-generation refrigerants. We talked about their potential, but what are the realistic chances of them being widely adopted in China? What are the hurdles?
That's the million-dollar question. A lot of industry experts are watching this very closely. As we said, fourth-generation refrigerants have a lot of environmental advantages going for them.
Right. Much smaller impact on the ozone layer and global warming, less harmful overall. But they do face some challenges, like we talked about earlier.
Exactly. Cost is a major barrier. Right now, those fourth-generation refrigerants are just more expensive to produce than HFCs.
I can imagine that's a tough sell for companies, especially those operating with tight margins.
It is. But there are reasons to be optimistic. As production scales up and the technology improves, the cost of these newer refrigerants is expected to come down. It's a matter of time and investment.
So patience is key. What are some of the signs that this shift is actually happening?
Well, we're already seeing positive developments. A number of Chinese companies are actively involved in developing and producing those fourth-generation refrigerants. They're not just waiting around, they're making moves.
So they're actively shaping the future of the market, not just reacting to it.
Precisely. And that proactive approach is what will drive the adoption of these more sustainable solutions. It's about more than just profits. It's about a commitment to a better future.
It's pretty exciting to think about the potential of these new technologies to completely change the refrigerant landscape.
It is. And it goes beyond just environmental benefits. Some fourth-generation refrigerants actually offer performance advantages in certain applications.
Really? What kind of advantages?
For example, some HFO refrigerants, they actually have better heat transfer properties than HFCs. That translates to better energy efficiency, which is a huge plus.
So it's a win-win, good for the planet and good for the bottom line. That's what we like to hear.
Exactly. And I think as consumers become more aware of the environmental impact of their choices, we'll see a growing demand for products that use these sustainable refrigerants. People want to do the right thing.
So there's a real market for these products, and it's only going to grow.
Absolutely. And Chinese companies, they're incredibly well positioned to meet that demand. They have the manufacturing capacity, the tech know-how, the government support, all the ingredients to become global leaders in producing these fourth-generation refrigerants.
It's amazing to witness how China has transitioned from following the industry to leading it.
It really speaks to their commitment to innovation and sustainability. It's a reminder that even in industries facing huge challenges, change is possible. It's happening right now.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about the environmental impact, the regulations, the black market, the future of the market, all these different angles. As we wrap up this part of our deep dive, what are some key takeaways for our listeners? What do they need to remember?
The main takeaway is that the refrigerant market is in a state of flux. It's going through a major transformation driven by environmental concerns, tech advancements, policy changes, all these converging forces. And this is a global transition, but China is right at the heart of it.
And their decisions, their actions, those will have a massive impact on the future of the market and the global effort to tackle climate change.
Yeah,
It's a big deal.
absolutely. And for investors, this market offers both risks and opportunities. We talked about some companies that are well positioned, but others are lagging behind. It's a dynamic landscape.
So it's crucial to do your research to understand the complexities of this market before jumping in. Knowledge is power.
I couldn't agree more. And it's important to remember this isn't just about business and profits. It's about the planet. It's about all of us.
That's a great point. The choices we make today as consumers, as investors, as citizens, they have consequences that will ripple out for generations to come. We have a responsibility to think long term.
The refrigerant market is a perfect example of that. Our decisions about the refrigerants we use directly impact our ability to mitigate climate change. It's a powerful connection.
It really highlights that shared responsibility, doesn't it? We all have a role to play.
Absolutely. We can make a difference. It starts with being informed and making conscious choices. Small actions can have a big impact.
Well said. Now, before we wrap up this deep dive completely, there's one more angle I'd like to explore. This whole conversation about refrigerants got me thinking about the bigger picture of sustainability, on a global scale.
Yeah, it's been pretty eye-opening to see how something like refrigerants, something most people probably don't give a second thought to, can actually have such a huge global impact.
It really does show how interconnected everything is, doesn't it? We start talking about appliances and end up discussing the ozone layer, global temperatures, the health of the whole planet. It's a chain reaction.
It makes you think about how we balance economic growth with environmental protection. It's a tough question, no easy answers there. Definitely brings up some crucial questions about the role of innovation. Can we actually develop solutions that meet our needs without compromising the planet in the process?
Looking at the refrigerant market, it does seem like the answer could be yes. I mean, we're seeing these companies invest in those fourth-generation refrigerants. Governments are taking steps to phase out the harmful stuff. It's not a perfect solution, granted, but it feels like at least we're moving in the right direction.
I agree, and I think that shift is happening because of a few things. Consumers are more aware, regulations are getting stricter, and companies are realizing that sustainable technologies can be profitable. It's all coming together.
It does feel like we're at a turning point. There's this sense of urgency, but also a lot of energy and innovation focused on finding solutions.
I think so too. That's what gives me hope. It shows that we can tackle these huge, complex problems when we work together, when we pool our knowledge and resources.
So to our listeners out there, next time you're grabbing something from the fridge or feeling that cool air from your AC, take a moment to think about those refrigerants working behind the scenes. It's a reminder that even our small choices, they really do matter. And hopefully this deep dive has sparked your curiosity, inspired you to maybe learn more about how you can make a difference. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the refrigerant market in China. Until next time.